Yo guys, how's it going? Kermota here. Welcome to another tutorial for Cymatics. Today I have a really important tutorial for you guys. I want to show you 7 tips and tricks or techniques that you can use on project files to improve your own production. This is covering everything from remixing to mix downs to what I like to call the wax on, wax off technique. I think this is viscerally important, especially if you guys are downloading all the free project files we're giving out for you guys. So let's just go. Now the first technique here I want to show you guys is making your own arrangement template. I know myself, when I sit down and write a song, sometimes I'm really confused as to what to do with an arrangement, or sometimes I'm partway through a song and I'm really stuck on what to do with an arrangement. And having these templates allow you to not have to think about what the next move is because you have some sort of map. This is really cool because it still gives you full creative control over the writing, but it just helps you simplify the arrangement process. So let me show you how to set this up. So I'm going to be doing this on our free Basshouse Ableton project. You can actually grab the thing right here or here or here or in the description. I don't know where I'm looking it up, but you can go grab it. But right off the bat, when you open this thing, you have this really cool arrangement laid out for you. And you're going to notice this with all the Cymatics project files that you have these warp markers. But what this allows you to do is create the first part of the arrangement template, which is the arrangement in the timeline sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert a new MIDI clip, and we'll just call this the arrangement. And what we're going to do is we're going to create some MIDI clips. So here's intro, and I'm just going to call this the whole intro. I'm going to call this whole section here the build, and I'm going to color it differently. And if I see it later on, a break build, I'm going to drop it there. And I'm going to copy the intro and I'm going to name it the outro. I'm not even listening to this thing, but I can really get a sense of what it's going to be like. Next, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to call this drop A, and I'm going to color it a specific way. I'm going to copy it over here. And then I'm going to copy this over, change the color to something completely different, and call this drop B. So there we go. That's a great first step. This is going to be our arrangement track in terms of the timeline. And this is going to be super useful if you're just not really sure what to do next. The cool thing is you can actually drag this out and save it in your library and save it in a folder, and then you can drag it into any track later. Now this gets a lot more interesting, however. This doesn't just have to be an arrangement in the timeline sense. I actually like to use the arrangement template in the arrangement of the instrument sense. So I'm going to jump to the drop to actually show this off. I'm not going to do this for the whole song because it's going to take too long, but I'll show you on just the drop. So let's jump here and listen to this thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an arrangement template. So I'm going to create the first track here, and I'm going to start with the drums. So I'm going to color it the same way as the drums. And I'm going to call this one here the kick. I know for this entire section here, the kick's going to be there. So I'm just going to create a MIDI clip for it. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the next element. I'm going to duplicate this, and maybe I'll call this the clap, because there's definitely a clap. And I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to call this a hat. And I'm going to do it one more time and call this one the ride. So what I'll do is I would group these and I would call this the drums. And if there were any changes, I would make it very obvious. So if maybe on the second half of the drop, a new piece of percussion comes in, I would just call this track percussion, and you'd be able to see that there's a new clip there. Now jump ahead and you'll see here that I've included a clip for the bass because the bass comes in at this point. Let's say in theory on the second half of the drop a new lead comes in. It doesn't in this song, but let's just say it did. And that new vocal comes in. So I added a vocal clip here. It also comes in on this section. so I know to add in a new vocal element here. So even if I'm not going to use any of the writing of the original session, I delete it all out. We now have this really cool arrangement track. And imagine had we done this for the entire course of the song, what you have is all these empty MIDI clips. So you know that here I'm going to add a new bass element. Here I'm going to add a lead element. Here I'm going to add a vocal element. And even though I'm not copying the writing in any way, I'm learning the arrangement of a song. I know when to bring in new elements, when to take elements out. And then it's also glued to this really nice and laid out arrangement here. Now, if you do this for a bunch of sessions, and Cymatics has tons of free ones, we have some excellent paid packs too, you'll have a ton of these to work off of, and you don't ever have to think about it. I know when I first got into production, arrangement was a little intimidating, and I was sometimes unsure of the right moves to make. And I know today I still get really stuck where sometimes I'm writing a song and I don't know what the next move is. I have these really cool templates, so I can just not even think about it. I can just get in, I can start pulling in sounds, making sounds, and writing. So that's technique number 1. Make yourself some really useful arrangement templates so you can learn arrangement. Tip 2 here is one of my favorites. This is making a sound design template out of these project files. So what I mean by this is what I want to do is I want to open up a project file. I know I have these well mixed, these well crafted sounds, and I know they're all laid out and I have enough that I would need for an entire song. Now, what I like to do with these templates is I actually like to delete all the information off of each track except for a single one of each element if it's audio or the synthesizer. So let's zoom in on our kick here. And what I would do is I would delete everything except the first kick. The same thing I would do with the rest of these claps. I'd go in, I'd delete everything except the first one. So I just have it here on my template. I would do the same with these hat loops, and I would probably even cut it down so I have just 1 or 2 of the different sounds in the loop so I can chop it up and write my own. And I would go across and I would do that with every element. So let me do that really quick. So here we go. I've dropped all the elements here actually outside of the arrangement, so I have them all in one go. I'm not going to hit play because that'd explode your ears. But what I have now is all the tools I would need to start writing. And I really like this because sometimes I just sit down and I want to write and I don't want to have to waste 2 hours pulling in and finding all the right sounds. Sometimes I'm feeling really creative and I'm feeling like a musician and I just want to go. And this way you don't have to think about it. I can just start laying down kicks wherever I need them. I could start laying down the claps wherever I need them. I could start writing my own hat patterns over this. And the best part is not only do I have that, but I can go in and I can actually start using these synths. So I have all these basses ready to go. I have synths ready to go, and I can just start writing. I don't have to think about anything. I can just open things up and I can start getting creative. And without even thinking about it, I just place some MIDI notes and I already have the beginning of a drop, and I didn't have to waste time making sounds. I didn't have to think about it. I just had some ideas and some notes and some rhythms in my head, and I just sat down and I wrote. So creating sound design templates out of these templates by wiping everything clean except the sounds is just a great thing to have. So when you're feeling really creative, you have the highest quality sounds in the world, pre-mixed, pre-mastered, and ready to go so you can just start writing. So let's check out how to reverse engineer sounds. So here's a drop. And I want to check out one of these sounds. So I'm going to open up this one here actually. Reminds me of old Skrillex, and I've always wanted to know how to make this sound. And I want to open it up and I want to reverse engineer this sound. So reverse engineering sounds for me is really going back to the original source of the sound, just the wavetables, and building things up like the original sound designer would have. So I'm going to turn off the filter. I'm going to turn off the noise. I'm going to turn off the sub. And what I like to do is I put the effects in order of them being on. And I remember that it stops at reverb, so it's easy to turn them off and go back to them. So let's check this out. In its rawest form, I can see that this one's even being frequency modulated from B, so I'm even going to turn off B. That is it in its rawest form. I can't even hear it. It must be a sine wave sub. I'm going to turn this way up just so you can hear that. And if you can't, check out the meters up here. So they started with just a really pure sub. But I can tell when I turn on the second oscillator, some character is going to happen. A lot of the sound is created there. So what we're going to do is we're going to reverse engineer that. We're going to check out what is going on. Well, the reason for this is oscillator B is not actually making any sound. Let's reverse engineer it. Let's look at all the different things going on. The level's at 0. So something has to be going on here. It's happening in the sub. The sub is being frequency modulated from B. So without it on, nothing on. It's starting to frequency modulate. Now let's check out a little bit of what's going on in here. It's clear that this is a high tone. It's 3 octaves up. That's why it's creating a bit of frequency modulation in with really shrill amounts up there. And you can tell this relatively basic shape is starting to bend and move in a weird way. So there's clearly a bend mode going on. The biggest takeaway for me from this, though, is that a really high sound frequency modulating a sine wave is going to give you that really nice sound. Next, let's add in the rest of the things that'll generate any sound. We have a sub. Just really important to get that in pure there. And notice it's going direct out, so it's going to be bypassing a lot of the effects and the filtering. And then lastly, we're going to turn on the noise. You can hear that added something in there. Add a bit of grit. And lastly, before we move on to the filter, let's just note and try and find out what is moving this sync rate. It is envelope 2 here. And it's clearly an envelope, which means the MIDI must have been written very quickly. Interesting choice, but now I'm learning you don't always have to use LFOs to achieve this. You can use very specifically shaped envelopes and then just repeat the MIDI note over and over again. Next, let's turn on the filter. Now this is really cool. I didn't know the ring mod filter could create a tone like this, and it really changes the whole sound from that to that. I noticed that the mix is also being modulated on and off at the same rate as this envelope. And now I'm curious to dissect this ring mod filter, maybe research and do more about it and find out why it's making that tone. And I can tell you that changing this cutoff is probably going to change the character quite a bit. So I'm actually going to slightly move it and just see. So it's really cool to note that this ring mod filter can make some really cool tones. Continuing our dissection now, let's move on to the effects to put the cherry on top of this sound. Now I've turned hyperdimension on here, and I can see by this little tiny knob up here that something's modulating it. And if you just click on things, you can see what it is. It was this macro here. And so now I know that I actually have the option to make this thing wider. That's cool to note for my own sounds that I might want to do that and have a specific stereo knob here. Moving forward, we have some distortion, really affecting this sound. And now I'm seeing something really cool, that the sound designer here actually add more filter movement by setting this to low pass and actually having this envelope or some sort of shape here. Envelope 2, modulate this thing. So that's really cool. I wouldn't have thought of that. Moving on, we've got the multiband compressor, making this thing really metallic and cool. Some more filter movement, this time with a really cool negative flanger sound. I like it because the results are never quite the same. So it adds a bit of life to this sound and makes it a little not so robotic by always having these differences. And moving on, we have the EQ, some cool delay, and lastly, some reverb. So there were a lot of really cool nuggets of information there, and I'm glad I took the time to go in and dissect it. And now I have a better idea of how to make these sounds, and I have really cool nuggets that I can apply when I'm making my own. So take the time with these project files to go in and find your favorite sounds and just really dig in and see what sort of things the sound designers were doing. This is one of the best ways to learn and get better for sure, hands down. The next technique I want to show you is called the wax on, wax off technique. Now for those that know the Karate Kid, which I hope is pretty much all of you, if you remember correctly, the Karate Kid, he is forced to wax on and wax off all day. He is forced to paint the fence up and down. And when he's finally put in the karate ring, all these moves, all this practicing just happens so fluid and so flawlessly, and he ends up being an absolute master. Now this is the same concept I want to show you with music. The wax on, wax off technique is just this, and it was brought to my attention the other day by one of the blogs written by the Cymatics crew, and that is you should be recreating songs. Now, I'm not saying you should necessarily be recreating it from scratch, just trying to figure it out, because not all of us have the skills to do that. I would probably struggle with that. But the wax on, wax off technique is actually taking one of these project files and opening it up and actually just by hand recreating each element. So let's say we had a kick pattern here. What I would do is I would grab the same kick and I would copy and paste it, and I would paste it all the way along. I'd do that with every element. I would do it with writing this, and I would just get used to pasting things there. Next, I'd do a very similar thing where I'd go into the synths, I'd create my own MIDI clips with the MIDI in it. I would insert my own MIDI, and then I would open up a fresh CRM patch, and I would actually create this. And then I would go in and I would start to create all these tools here. Now this is exactly just the waxing on, waxing off. What this is you are waxing on, waxing off all day. You're learning these skills. You're kind of subliminally inputting into your mind how to make these sounds or how a song works, or even just shortcuts and how to be super duper quick at it. So then when you sit down after say a week of doing this, you're going to have all these new ideas. You're going to have all these new skills, and you're just going to be laser quick at it, and you're going to be a karate master with Ableton. So I highly recommend, if ever you're uninspired going into the studio, why don't you just sharpen your skills? You can do this even when you're exhausted after a day of work and you're feeling uninspired. You can practice your karate techniques. Now the next technique is transferring chunks of songs. So if you weren't aware of this in Ableton, you can actually highlight any given amount of tracks or any given amount of groups, and you can move them to another session together. Let's say I had a different session going and I had written a bass line, but I didn't want to waste time, say, writing a drum part, and I knew there was already a drum part existing in a different session. Well, what you can do is you can highlight the desired amount of tracks. So let's say in this case, I'm actually going to grab the effects, I'm going to grab the drums, and I'm going to grab my voice channel to easily drag in. What I can do is I can drop it here, and I can call this drum temp. Because what we're going to do is we're going to open another session, and we're going to bring in the drum temp. So if you just click this track and you drag it in, it'll load up just that. It'll be the drums, it'll be the effects, it'll be whatever you brought in. And now I can just use it for this one part of the song because I didn't want to have to waste time creating all these elements. And now I have a temporary drum and effects section, so I don't even have to think, and I can go write the next part. Cool, let's check out the next technique. Now I grabbed a really cool free future bass track here. Because I want to see if I can dig in and grab any cool mixing chains or learn from mixing chains and learn a bit about mixdowns. So even looking at the first pluck at the bottom here, I'm getting a really cool idea. If you guys didn't know this, the glue compressor comes with a soft clipper, and I see that they're actually clipping this pluck for a really cool tone. So without this glue compressor on right here, it's just barely tickling over the edge and into the red here. But if we turn on this glue compressor, you can hear that they are slamming it with the makeup into this soft clip. Look at what would happen if we didn't have soft clip on. going way into the red. Now, I'm not saying that this is a limiter, and I'm not saying this is necessarily clean, but what I am saying is this is a really cool technique because soft clipping is a form of distortion. To describe a hard clipper, imagine you had a sine wave and it goes over a certain part. Well, imagine when it was supposed to go over that certain part, it gets squared off, and then it comes back down and gets squared off where it should have gone over, and then it comes back up. A soft clipper is doing a very similar thing. It's kind of preventing it from going over a certain point, which if you imagine a sine wave would go to a square wave, and if you know the difference between a sine wave and a square wave, there's a lot more harmonics and there's a lot more tone going on there. So imagine a similar concept is going on here with the soft clipper, where everything that's going over is being clipped off, which actually creates harmonics. And so you could hear it takes it from this pretty soft pluck to this kind of crunchy pluck here, but it's not using any more volume than what was originally there. So this is a really cool technique in terms of mix downs of how you can save energy, and I just learned that from going in and dissecting this. Now there's another cool tool I found here called grain stereo. Now this is one I really had no clue about. Let's go to a part where the pluck is playing. Really cool sound. And if I turn off this grain stereo here, you can hear it loses a bit of the sense of width that was going on. Now what I thought it was going to be is going to be some sort of Haas effect, and it's kind of similar to the Haas effect, where if you open it up, one of the ears has a weird grain delay on it, and it's delaying it by 19 milliseconds. So this is very similar to the Haas effect, and for those that don't know what the Haas effect is, it's a way of giving a sound a sense of stereo by the interaural time difference between ears. So if a sound is coming in one ear and then it's actually delayed a few milliseconds in the next, your brain is going to perceive that as width. And you can do something very similar here where we've got the right channel, we've got the left channel, and then this one, the right channel has actually been delayed by 20 milliseconds. Now what I can do is I can actually drag this grain stereo into my library, and I know what it's doing, and now I have it for later use. And this is me just seriously scrolling up the plucks here. If I were to go through this entire song, there would be a myriad of really cool tools to use, and I'm just learning about mixdowns so I can create this fat and juicy future-based track here. So cool. And if I didn't already say, you can grab this thing for free here, or down in the description. I don't know where it's linked up, but you can go grab it. Now for the last technique, I want to show you guys inside of our new project, Cartel. Not everyone has access to stems of other people's music, and sometimes it's really cool to go in and remix music with all the available sounds. I think remixing is an absolutely fundamental skill because it teaches you how to sample. It just allows you to mangle other people's ideas, so you're not having to come up with 100% of your own, and you're going to yield some really cool results no matter what happens. Now, the art of remixing could be an entire tutorial unto itself, probably an entire course unto itself, so there's a bit too much to teach. But what I recommend is you go download Cartel. It's only $3, and you guys can actually go and implement all these techniques. You can go in and study. You can go in and create the arrangement templates, the sound templates. You can practice the art of remixing. You can dissect the really cool sounds in here. You could recreate everything with the wax on, wax off. You could learn how to mix. This is one of the most powerful learning tools. I wish I had had this when I had started production. It would have saved me years. I know I'm going to go ahead and play with this thing and learn something still. So I'm going to have to leave you guys and go play with Cartel. So thanks again, guys. My name's Cymatics. We're Cymatics, and I'll be back soon. Peace.